You've been watching this special election series, so these are the last few episodes going out.
Since 1996, BJP is the preferred national party for Karnataka.
The 24 manifesto looks like a
radical document.
Yeah, a radical document. And what influenced Congress in trying to give it a more left tilt?
Whether BJP wins or does not win, there is likely to be some disturbance. It can cause a law and order problem. And I think all state governments and the central government have to be ready for it.
The Congress has absolutely no mass movement which is involved in the grassroots, and it uses progressive movements such as yours as legs to enter the grassroots.
Were we a perfect democracy in 2014? Certainly not. Therefore, I keep on saying we were a democracy just about in the making. Then the last 10 years was a rude and a very, very cruel regression. If we come back somewhat to the rails, I don't know, on June 4th we will know. Otherwise, the struggle is going to be even harder. Then we will have a lot of repairing to do, but we also have to do the repairing side by side with all this introspection and reform.
The most influential ism in the country today appears to be Hindutva. It has taken a long time for this ideology to come of age. But what happened to the other ideological movements that began in the early 20th century? The RSS will turn 100 years old next year, but so will the Communist Party of India. Ambedkarism, Marxism, liberalism, Dravidianism, feminism, Gandhiism. What role are these great big isms of the 20th century playing in the 21st century? What relevance do they have today?
I'm an atheist in the same way as I'm an a-leprechaun.
Why have there been casteism existing in the country still today?
Feminism, by definition, is the belief that men and women should have equal
So the
rights.
nature of the system is to be as mean and rotten as you can, to try to maximize profit.
The national elections are around the corner, and what better time than now to talk about isms? I'm Sudipto Mondal, and welcome to this special election series of What's Your Ism? Hello and welcome to yet another episode of What's Your Ism? You've been watching this special election series, and I thought this was a good time to remind you that it takes a lot of effort and a lot of people to put this show together. We are close to wrapping up this series, but there'll be another season of What's Your Ism after the elections. Now let me introduce you to our guest today. The man you're going to listen to and try and find out his ism is a human rights activist and an army veteran. That's a rare mix. Major General Sudhir Vombatkere. Sir, thank you so much for coming on this show. How are you doing?
Thank you, Sudipto. And I'm doing fine.
It's a rare mix, right? A soldier and a human rights activist. That's how I introduced you. Is that a correct introduction?
Well, it's not wrong.
Okay. Sir, before I start off, the world knows you. Of course, there are a lot of interventions you've made since you've retired. You worked with the Narmada Bachao Andolan to amplify their voices. You worked on environmental causes. But I suppose the one thing which will probably leave an indelible mark on the history timesheet is your intervention in the sedition matter. And the Supreme Court has put brakes on that colonial era law. And I remember when that Supreme Court order came out, you were talking about how there will be an opportunity for people who are booked under the law to now seek bail. Before we get into the actual discussion about isms, is there any update you want to share with us on that case, sir?
No, the sedition petition has been put on hold, or rather it's not been, there is no new hearing slated. So we are waiting for the pleasure of the Supreme Court.
Okay. And in the meantime, the government has brought in this new BNS.
Oh no, they have violated the request. Unfortunately, it wasn't an order of the Supreme Court. It was a plaintiff appeal to the government that you should not use section 124A, but they used it in Manipur. And I've written on that also.
Right. And just one quick question, one last question about that part, which is that the new BNS, the law that the government is proposing, it has a slight change in wording. So the colonial era law had the word government that has been replaced with India, which is that to promote any kind of disaffection towards the government was the colonial era wording, and now in this new proposed law it is against India. So is there some difference then between what they have proposed and what exists as law now?
I haven't gone into the detail of the replacement of words, but the Nyaya Samhitas are they are actually they will be worse put together. They will be worse than the sedition law.
Right, right. And one other general question to the general, which is, see, you've been involved in a lot of civil rights movements. You've been involved with civil society groups. That's where, in fact, I wanted to meet you last week in Bangalore when you were here to attend this meeting of Edelu Karnataka, which is a civil society group. So because you have some immersion at the grassroots, where do you think we stand right now?
I don't think it's worthwhile agitating one's mind on whether it's going to be for 400 par or whether it's going to be whatever. But what I did do is I wrote an article in the Countercurrents. It's called Schrodinger, India Schrodinger Moment, 4th of June. I have recalled Schrodinger's cat. Erwin Schrodinger was a Nobel laureate who got his Nobel in 1933. In 1935, he proposed, or he posited a thought experiment in which you put a hypothetical cat inside a box along with a poisonous substance which will eventually kill the cat, and then you close the box and you will not know whether the cat is alive or dead until you open the box. So what I have put is, in the box I have put democracy as the cat, and the hate speech and the hate atmosphere as the poisonous substance. And we don't know whether the democracy will be alive or dead until 4th of June when you open the box.
Right. Nicely put. Opening the box. Okay, so I'd like to start from there a little bit. You know, opening the box has become a matter of contention, not just in India, but across the world. You know, I was just kind of doing some research, and I figured that, hey, 2024 is a very important year for democracies across the world, because half the population of the world is going to vote in this particular year. And in 2024, we also probably have to concede that you know, the alarm over slide in democracy, the alarm over you know, the erosion of democratic values is something that is now global. And in that, there is also a lot of how do I put it, skepticism about how elections are conducted in the first place, because you know, we saw, I mean, this is not new, we've been seeing it since the last Russian elections. Just this year we saw what happened in Pakistan, right? And at this event where you were, the Edelu Karnataka event, one of the things that came up repeatedly from the speakers was this fear that this election might be stolen, that there is a lot of malpractice going on. We also obviously saw some very overt forms of malpractice where there was voter suppression in Uttar Pradesh. Now the PDP in Kashmir, Mehbooba Mufti, she's claiming that her supporters are also being prevented from visiting the polling booth. So I just want some general comments about you about the slide in democracy, and the kind of you know, in the electoral system itself, there are questions being asked now. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's not only the electoral system, but in all the institutions of the state, the constitutional institutions of the state, there has been a real deterioration of their functioning in terms of the constitution. And all the officials in those institutions have taken office and taken oath of office to do their duty in accordance with the constitution. and they are not doing it. Now, returning to the Election Commission, I think they also, the appointment of the two election commissioners at the last moment and the way in which they were selected, and now the conduct of the Election Commission itself puts a big question mark on its credibility. So I wouldn't say that they are helping this side or that side, but the way things are going, there's a question mark on their credibility. For example, now when ADR went to the Supreme Court saying that the numbers should be put in the on the website rather than the percentages, they say that it is not a legal requirement for 17C to be put on the website. But it may be true that it's not a legal requirement, but surely it's not illegal because earlier election commissions had been doing it. Now, this adds to the question of doubt and the credibility of the election commission, why it is even pleading that it is not a legal requirement. What's your problem putting the numbers? Because we have found in some cases that the votes which are actually polled are less than the votes counted, reported.
Right. No, I just want to quote this one sentence from the Economist Intelligence Unit, which is the sister concern of the Economist, the magazine, and they say that about 30% of elections this year across the world, that is, won't be free or fair. Do you think India falls in that list of 30% of countries?
I don't know whether we fall in what percentage of countries. I don't want to hazard a guess. The point is that people are not happy with the conduct of the Election Commission of India, and I think everyone is aware that the narrative which is being put out by the BJP and led by the Prime Minister is not about people. It is about putting down the other side. It's not talking about what they do, but what are all the problems with the INDI alliance. So, and when hate speeches are made, the Election Commission gives the notice of hate speech to the president of the party. So, all these things make it, I don't want to say whether the election process will not be free and fair. I can't say that.
I mean, this is conversation I'm picking up from civil society groups today who are expressing a lot of concern about the freeness and the fairness of the election. After you spoke at Bangalore, there were other speakers who talked about the voting machines and, who talked about the term stolen elections was used, saying that, what if this election is stolen? And in that, I'll ask a few supplementary questions, but I just want to quote. You cited a Nobel winner. I'll cite another, Kofi Annan, right? The Nobel Prize winner from the United Nations. Now he wrote an article recently, and he's saying that, and the article was titled "Stolen Elections as a Political Strategy," right? And he's kind of course, he's coming from a very statist, perhaps, pro-institutional kind of a framework, but he goes on to say that these assertions can be part of a deliberate effort to undermine trust and stir resentment. And indeed, as the world has seen, claims of stolen elections can have devastating violent effects, particularly at a time when trust in institutions and the veracity of information is so low. Right? Just to play the devil's advocate, knowing fully well that the Election Commission has not been entirely, let's say, dependable, right? Do you think that there is a possibility on the other side to brand you people as a bunch that is using this as a political strategy to undermine the ruling government, to perhaps even cast aspersions on their electoral credibility?
Oh yes, that's perfectly possible. And in fact, some of us have already been branded as anti-national and urban Naxals and so on. But that's hardly the point. Look at what Putin has done. He has put all the opposition into prison, and then he gets 84% of the votes. So anything can happen. I mean, we've got two chief ministers sitting in prison right now. Or rather, Kejriwal is out on bail, but otherwise he was in prison. So, if that sort of thing can be done, then I don't know whether it is fair to call it free and fair.
Right, because I mean, why go as far as Russia? What happened right next door in Pakistan, right?
Pakistan too, Bangladesh too.
Right. Apart from the outcome of the election, fears have been raised also about what might happen either which way, which is that there is, I mean, you said that given the nature of this, of the BJP, of the Sangh Parivar, these large, Hindutva groups, that a law and order situation might develop after the election, even if whether they come to power or whether they don't come to power. There are fears that there may be a law and order situation. What are those fears? How do you foresee things playing out after the results come out?
We are a very emotional people. When we lose a cricket match, we are very angry, and we come out in the streets and we condemn the captain, cricket captain, and so on. And when we win, we are jubilant. We are at the two extremes. So a similar thing is likely to happen, because the stakes in the cricket matches are different. The stakes in general elections are far more important and big for the whole country.
And the fan clubs are better organized in the case of political parties.
Yes. Whether BJP wins or does not win, there is likely to be some disturbance, if not much more disturbance, in the streets. It can cause a law and order problem, and I think all state governments and the central government have to be ready for it. I believe they are getting ready for it. I have an unconfirmed report that there's a mock drill conducted in the Parliament House by the CRPF, or one of the police forces, for preventing crowds coming into or towards the Parliament House. So I think governments are getting ready for it, because I'm sure they are able to anticipate that things may not go right. So there's no harm in being prepared for a tense situation all over the country. Mind you, it may be in many states, not all over the country. It may be in many states, and we may even lead to a situation like Manipur.
That sounds scary, because if the situation becomes like Manipur, then we are talking about the army being deployed. That cannot be pleasant, can it? Do you see that happening?
I don't know, because the normal process is that the state government puts the state police to try and control the law and order situation.
But you mentioned Manipur,
by
that's
imposing Section 144. And when that doesn't succeed, they make a bid to the center for the Central Armed Police Forces. So the ITBF or the CRPF or one such police force, they come into the state and try to establish law and order, re-establish law and order. And when they also fail, then the army is called in. This is a normal process. And the army is the instrument of last resort for any government. So the army may well be called in.
Right, because when you consider the ability that the Sangh Parivar has for a disruption, it is massive, right? They have, as you know, I mean, we all know that there are these militant organizations with cadres running into thousands of men who can create trouble on the street, and if the army is called in, that brings us, I mean, if we were to consider that scenario, you mentioned Manipur, and that's why my tentacles went up, because Manipur, Kashmir, Nagaland, we've seen how difficult civilian life can become if the army is deployed in a civilian area, right? And if that were to happen, I suppose the first thing that we need to then worry about is the ideology of the army, the ism of the army. Let's speculatively, if we talk about the army being deployed, how do you think the army is going to, its presence is going to play out?
The army does not have any ideology. The army, Indian army, is apolitical, as it should be. I think everybody in the army understands that in India, the army is under civilian control. So the army is apolitical and without ideology, any political ideology. It is the only secular institution in the whole country. So the army troops will do what they are ordered to do, which is to establish law and order. And they will have to be empowered by having a magistrate with every column. And if there are not enough magistrates because there are too many columns, then you have to invoke the Armed Forces Special Powers Act.
Right, and you say it's the only secular institution in the country. Why do you say that? Apart from the secular and the communal, there is also the political, right? The political leanings of an individual, the political leanings of a group of people who belong to the same community, and sometimes there are attempts from outside to politicize a group of people, and that is where I want to take you back to 2019, where you led a group of very senior veterans. Several chiefs of staff were among them. You led that group in writing a letter to the President of India and raised alarm about the politicization of the army. Right? I'd let you talk about that episode a little bit. It started off, of course, with this comment by the UP Chief Minister, where he called the army Modi's army. Right? That was the trigger for it. But I'll let you talk about that moment a little and ask you some supplementaries. What happened back then, and why did it become a watershed moment?
I don't know whether it's a watershed moment, but the fact is that the army is the Indian Armed Forces, actually, the Army, Navy and the Air Force. They come directly under the President of India, who is the Supreme Commander of the Indian Armed Forces. So to call it Modi's army or Prime Minister's army or anyone else's army is completely wrong, and it sends wrong signals.
But was that particular episode the straw that broke the camel's back? Because there had been attempts, which you yourself have written about, to politicize the army, to use army soldiers for political gain, to use conflicts.
Yes. It has happened.
Yeah.
It has happened, and soldiers were asked to lay yoga mats for the first yoga day, and then soldiers were asked to clear up the garbage which tourists left in Himachal Pradesh, and then more recently the defense forces were asked to put up selfie points with Modi's picture. And then in the Army Commanders Conference, there were big cutouts of Mr. Modi. So all these are steps of politicizing the army, which is a very unhealthy thing for national security. It's not just about the army, because if the army gets politicized, it is going to affect national security.
But have you seen this happening before? I mean, I was not even born when Indira Gandhi was around. But did stuff like this happen back then? To use?
Never.
No.
Never was any political person trying to use the army for his personal promotion.
The spoils of the 71 war, how it benefited Indira, in the elections.
No, I think the situation now is entirely different.
So then let me ask you, how do you assess? We can't look at the army. I mean, it's too large an entity to put a finger on and describe it in one way. But let's look at some of the chiefs of staff that we have had over the last decade, right? One of them in 2014 joined the BJP, became a minister, right? It can't. I mean, if a person of that seniority immediately after demitting office gets into a political party, is that an indication of a trend, or is that an outlier, you think?
It may show the beginning of an event, because actually even before General V.K. Singh joined the BJP, after he had retired, in the run-up to the 2014 election, if I remember right, somewhere in Hisar or somewhere, he was with Mr. Modi on the electioneering platform, in which Mr. Modi assured veterans that they would be given OROP. So he was, supposedly to help the veterans get one rank, one pension. But although that didn't happen, the point is that there are a number of lieutenant generals and major generals who are openly pro-BJP. I mean, there is no problem if someone is pro-BJP because it's a recognized party in India. And you can vote for BJP if you feel that you need to vote for them. That's a personal matter. And they are together in a group and they are with think tanks which are run by the government. And all these things are unhealthy. Actually, what has happened is that there has been divisiveness which has started. And that divisiveness not only has come among the veterans, it has come within communities, even within families, where we have got one member of the family who thinks one way, another one who thinks the other way. And there is no common ground. You can't talk about anything except the cost of cabbages.
You write often in countercurrents. I was reading one of your older articles in which you looked at the entirety of the Hindu society, and you said there are 4 types of Hindus. There are the absolutely lower middle class, people who are on the margins. Then you have people who are perhaps even lower than that. You have the middle class, and then you have the upper class. And you said that the upper class tends to be a little secular. I think you said they have leftist tendencies. The lower middle classes swing whichever way. The lowest classes are actually waiting for a kind of a left resurgence, minus their atheism, minus their Stalinism. That was the kind of piece you wrote describing different types of Hindus, and your conclusion was that not all of them are Sanghis and not all of them are pro-Hindutva, and the BJP or Hindutva represents only a fraction of Hindu society. Now, one thing I suppose you can't avoid noticing about the army, taking all that you said in good faith, which is that there are Muslim soldiers, there are Christian soldiers, but the reality is that an overwhelming majority of Indian soldiers happen to be Hindu, and therefore I ask you, how does it drop over there? I mean, because if they happen to be overwhelmingly Hindu, being Hindu also comes with the baggage of several beliefs, some of which are political, some of which are relevant in today's time, in the times of Hindutva. What in the army do you see which can be categorized? What kind of different ideological formations are there in there?
I don't think there are any divisions within the army or the navy or air force. But each soldier naturally has his preferences and whom he associates with when he goes home on leave. That's his business. He may start associating with the people with saffron tendencies or whatever. That's his. He's at liberty to do that, but it does not interfere with his functioning within the unit.
Because it's not just someone like a V.K. Singh, right? There was also a certain Colonel Purohit, and that we never heard anything beyond that. We don't know how deep the.
No, we have to understand how the army functions.
Okay.
When a section of or a platoon of some 30 odd soldiers goes out on a patrol or on an assignment, on a military assignment, they undergo a lot of risk, a lot of tension, a lot of stress, because there is a risk to life and limb, and they have got their buddy has got to be someone whom he trusts. So the buddy may well be from another religion, and it doesn't matter to him as long as he has got trust in that man. Then he is okay. Otherwise, he can't function. That unit will fail because you never know who will get the first bullet. So you have to be sure that your buddy is going to give you support.
I take that point. In a conflict situation, it's. I mean, I hate to compare the two. I don't mean to demean the the real battle. But if you look at it in a way, in a cricket team, you have people who are Muslims, who are Christian, who are Hindu, who are Sikh, right? But even in the case of the Indian cricket team, though when push comes to shove, when they're running between the wickets, they trust their partner, right? I can safely say that the Indian cricket team does represent a certain Hindu upper caste ethos. Over time, if you look at the arc of their behavior over the last 70, 80, 100 years that they have existed, right? You can say that the Indian cricket team does represent that kind of ethos, that kind of sentiment. It manifests in funny ways, you know. For instance, this one occasion where
I'm not much of a cricket fan, I don't know.
Either, but just to give you an analogy. So therefore,
but military deployment is far from cricket.
No, of course it is, which is why I gave the disclaimer in the beginning. I'm not for a second saying that being in conflict is the same as running between wickets. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that yes, of course, if there's a Muslim officer and a Hindu soldier or vice versa, there is a kind of esprit de corps that is at play over there, and it's a matter of survival as well. That doesn't, of course, take away from the fact that all of what the army does is not conflict. That a large part of the army, in fact, is mostly in a non-conflict situation where there are cantonments and there are families and there are entire regiments who have been provided quarters. In these quarters, certain festivals are celebrated. In these quarters, there is a certain way of life, and that way of life is not divorced from ideology. Let's say when you say ideology, it's not something as simple as communism, Hindutva.
No, then let me tell you what happens.
Okay.
Whether a unit is in deployment in the field or in the cantonment in what they call peace station, the unit still remains a unit. And when they are in the peace station, they are not simply sitting around and twiddling their thumbs. They are training. There is regular ongoing training for all units at all times, and so that training is with your buddy. So there is no question of there being like a cricket team that when I go forward, I ask my buddy to give me covering fire so that I will not be shot. I have to trust him that he'll give me covering fire. But if I don't have trust in him because he's a Muslim and I go forward, maybe he's not giving me covering fire so that I will get killed.
Oh no!
You see, that will not happen.
I'm not talking about that situation. I'm talking about a non-training, non-combat situation. I'm talking about life in the army. I'm talking about cultural aspects.
Life in the army is perfectly secular and happy. Of course, there are breaches of discipline, but they are nothing concerned with religion.
Right. What about caste, General Vombatkere? Because recently...
Caste also is not an issue.
Okay. Because recently, and this has been a demand that has recurred over the years, the most recent was this political leader called Chandrasekhar Azad from the Bhim army, who said that why is there no Chamar regiment when there is a Dogra regiment, when there is a Sikh regiment, when there is...
No, there is a Mahar regiment.
Yes, but he talked about a Chamar regiment. How do you respond to that? Initially, I'll go further after you respond to that.
It is not useful because you can ask all sorts of questions. We can ask why is there no Gujarat regiment?
That's not the same as because it's in the case of the Chamar regiment, there is a history of the Chamar regiment, right? Which is that it existed.
No. There is no such thing as a Chamar regiment. There is a Mahar regiment.
Yes. Now there is a Mahar regiment, but there was once a Chamar.
Not now. A Mahar regiment is 200 years old.
Yes.
It's not now.
Of course. No, I'm saying there is even now there is a Chamar regiment, but a Mahar regiment, but the Chamar regiment was disbanded, and I was just reading up its history. Yes. There was a Chamar regiment.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge.
So they fought even until the Second World War, and I was reading a piece of...
No, these are all stories. It is like the story that there was a Muslim regiment which was disbanded because they said ABCD.
No.
There has never been a Muslim regiment in the Indian Army.
Okay, let me just pull out...
In fact, that was one of the points which I have raised in a letter, that there have been in an open letter, to say that the tweets that Muslim regiment was disbanded because they were anti-India, anti-something, was going around. And I can send you that reference if you wish.
I'm just reading out a reference for you. So the Chamar regiment was an infantry regiment among the units raised by the British during World War II to increase the strength of the Indian Army during World War II. It was active between 1943 and 1946. Now, what's interesting is that just recently, a couple of veterans from the Chamar regiment who probably are in their 90s, I'm going to try and find their names right in a second.
Okay.
So, Chunni Lal, Jogi Ram and Dharam Singh, these three soldiers were in the Chamar regiment between 43 and 46. Now, they were among the people.
Okay, I was
who
not.
wrote the National Commission for Scheduled
I am
Castes.
now informed. Thank you for informing me that there was a Chamar regiment. But the question: why is there no Chamar regiment?
There's more to it. There are two factors which went into the disbanding of the Chamar regiment. One of them being that they refused to fight against Subhash Chandra Bose's INA. And the second, that there was a huge backlash from in the Hindi-speaking belt right up till Bengal against the presence of the Chamar regiment. This is something that created insecurity among upper castes of these regions, and there was like a lot of lobbying with the British to disband this regiment. So that's the history of the regiment. And these three gentlemen who I mentioned, Chunni Lal, Jogi Ram and Dharam Singh, they petitioned to the National Commission for Scheduled Castes, which again took it up with the government on the same question, saying that why was this regiment disbanded. And you can say that there is no need for something like that, but I suppose from the point of view of the most oppressed sections in our society, military service is seen as something of a way to kind of secure their self-respect, to regain their position in society, to kind of emerge as a group of people who are also in service of the nation, and therefore perhaps fight off some of the stigma that they face. So therefore, this is all the background from where all of this is coming, and it is not again that in their petition, in fact, the thing that came up was that it is not some outlying demand, and they gave the references of the other units in the army. Right? You have the Sikh regiment, you have the Dogra, you have other units which are after castes and communities and religions. So therefore, why can't we have this? How do you respond to that? Basically talking about social justice in the army.
No, there is no concept of social justice in the army, because like in my regiment, the Madras Sappers, we've got scheduled caste soldiers, we've got ST soldiers, we've got Adi Dravid soldiers, we've got Hindus, Christians, Muslims, and of all castes. In fact, one of the stories told of some years ago in British times was a British officer who went up to a soldier and asked him, what is your caste? Because in those days the British were particular that they did not want to offend somebody because of caste. So he asked, what is your caste? And this man replied, my caste is Sapper caste. Sappers is our regiment.
Right. No, because
you see, that is the view that everyone, nobody asks a soldier, which caste are you from? It doesn't matter.
But nevertheless, if you go back into the history of the Indian Army, you will know that the British actually worked very hard in developing a race theory and a caste theory around martial races, as you know. Right, so for them, the Sikh, the Dogra, the Pashto, the Baloch, the Pathan were seen as martial races, and there were some races seen as not, let's say, brave enough, not military enough, and their regiments were formed on these lines. And I don't know enough about the army, and that's why I'm asking you. This legacy, a lot of the things that the British started has continued as legacy in the army, and these regiments also have continued. This race and caste theory coinciding, right? You have a bunch of people from Europe coming here and internalizing some of our prejudices over here. First, if I'd like you to comment on that, and then we'll try and see if some of it has survived to this day. But how do you see that kind of an effort by the British?
This business of martial race and martial people and those who are not martially inclined it probably started with Mangal Pandey. in 1857.
1857, yeah.
He was from a regiment which was all Brahmins. In those days, they employed Brahmins because they got a good salary from the East India Company, and it was the East India Company. I don't remember which regiment it was, which was an all Brahmin regiment, and Mangal Pandey was one of those who fired a shot, and all that happened. We know all that, which is first war of independence. It was Sepoy Mutiny according to the British. And Mangal Pandey's regiment was from the Bengal army. There were three armies in those days, the Madras, Bengal and the Bombay army. Three presidencies and the armies of those. And they disbanded the Bengal army regiments because that is why today we don't have a Bengal regiment either. Mind you, yeah, we have got a Bihar regiment, but we don't have a Bengal regiment. The things that the British did were in their own interest. Now, if you come to why you have a Rajput regiment and a Dogra regiment and so on, is because it is the bond of fellowship which is important in actual operations. The army is designed for operations, for war, for battle. That is the purpose of the army. And even if we go for internal security duties, the patrolling and the cordon search and all that are actually military operations. And there the bonding between soldiers in an operation is very, very important. The trust which comes out of bonding. And it is difficult for a soldier who is from, say, from Punjab, who is a Sikh, to bond with someone who is who has completely different customs and background and language. So to have regiments which are confined to a particular place or a particular region makes good sense in operation.
But then when you have that kind of sameness, you have, of course, it becomes easier with food, for example. Everybody's broadly agreeing on the same kind of food. Everybody is, when it comes to festivals, people are celebrating together and all of that. But all of these cultural factors are also the foundation for a later ideology to develop, right? And that's why I'm going on and on, beating around the bush and trying to figure out, is there at all, if at all, you find that...
No, there is no ideology because the soldiers, when they are attested, it's called an attestation parade, they all take oath to protect the constitution. They take oath on their respective holy books to protect the constitution. So it is the constitution which is the ideology.
Right. Now, if you go back to the 1857 period, and you talk about how Mangal Pandey's unit, the Bengal unit, was mostly Brahmin soldiers. The British, after the 1857 revolt, there was the Peel Commission, the Jonathan Peel Commission, which went into these so-called disturbances. They called it the mutiny. And one of the things that they came up as a matter of policy was we have to promote a certain incestuous diversity among the ranks, which is that we have to get castes and creeds from all sorts of backgrounds in order for them not to be able to unite, right?
They did do that. For example, in the Gorkha regiment, you have got in the Gorkha regiment, you have got one battalion which is only Limbus, who are Brahmins, and you've got one battalion which is only Khatris. But in the same regiment, you have got different battalions, but they are separate. Because the bond, the fellowship has to be maintained. The final aim is to fight battles. And internal security duties are equally important in the battle sense.
See, as long as they are fighting battles, me, the civilian, doesn't have to worry. But in the scenario where I might have an army man outside my door, in the event that there's a disturbance because of political, fights in this country, I can't help but ask myself, what is the ideology of that army man? And because it is in internal security situations that you really have to ask those questions. Because if you look at some of the things that happened in Manipur, in Nagaland, in different parts of the northeast, in Assam, in Kashmir, obviously also, the kind of how do I put it, zeal that certain sections of the army displayed were over and above the call of duty, honestly. The kind of torture that was committed by the army on
These
certain...
things do happen, and they are violation of human rights without a doubt. Now, how I got into the issue of human rights, which you started asking me right in the beginning, is that I was Additional Director General Discipline and Vigilance, and in between 94 and 96. And in 93, the Chief of Army Staff established a human rights cell in the Army headquarters, and that human rights cell came under my directorate. So that's how I got involved and interested in human rights issues. And incidentally, the Army's human rights cell was raised in March 1993, whereas the National Human Rights Commission was raised only in October 1993.
Right. What were you getting at? I mean, what you saying that therefore the army you saying...
No, that if a soldier lands up at your door, trust me, he will not see whether you are a Muslim or a Hindu or a Christian.
But that is not what we have learned from the experiences in Manipur, in Nagaland, in Kashmir.
No, not in Manipur. There have been violations in Nagaland and in Kashmir, not in Manipur.
In Manipur also. The Assam Rifles were in Manipur, no?
No, they are definitely violations. I am not saying that they don't happen. They do happen. There is rape, there is murder, there is theft. All kinds of things do happen. But the question here is, why is the army there in the first place? That is a question we need to ask. And that the army is there because the government has failed in governance. They are unable to maintain law and order using their state police forces, using their central armed police forces. They are unable to do it. In fact, if you look at the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, the text of the act, it's very clear that the act has been passed in Parliament because of the failure of government to maintain peace.
Right. So you're basically saying, be what it may be. I mean, the army, whatever it is, at all costs, we should try and prevent a situation where the army has to be deployed into a civilian area.
Yes. And today, 1/3 of the army, or around 1/3 of the army, is deployed on internal security duties. And there is a statistic that on the average, once in 4 days, the army is called out at some place in India for aid to the civil power, including rescuing children from bore wells, which the civil government can easily do. Why do you have to call the army? It is utter incompetence of successive governments, regardless of their political parties. Utter incompetence and corruption. Let me not miss out saying that.
So fine, my parting question before we finish then, I want to once again, I think the one thing that stood out was that statement you made where you said there cannot be room for social justice in the army. So, you know, I just want to take you back to this episode between Jagjeevan Ram, who was the defense minister, and Sam Manekshaw, right? So in 1972, if I'm not wrong, Jagjeevan Ram writes this letter to the army chief saying, where are the SC/STs in the military? And Manekshaw writes back saying that about 15%, more than 15% of our Jawans, our soldiers, are from the depressed classes. Every battalion has about 150 to 100 cobblers and sweepers and group Ds, as you call them. And among the officers, though, he said that they were only 1% of the officers, right? With a section of society which is about 30% of the population. When it comes to the officer cadre, they are only 1% of that cadre. This was 1972. And Manekshaw says that even that was an improvement, and says that in 1947 there wasn't a single officer from the SC/ST communities. So therefore, I once again ask you, do you really think that social justice or representation are things that the army shouldn't consider? Because is there a design to this exclusion, let's say? Every time we see certain communities missing, we wonder if there is a design.
It is not an exclusion. It is actually we select, as far as officers are concerned particularly, we go through a process of appearing for a UPSC examination. After that, we have to pass through a services selection board, which tests, there is a psychological test, there is group testing which is done, and there is an interview. There is intelligence test also done, and there is an interview. It is these 4 different kinds of tests which assess whether the individual, the candidate, is fit to be admitted to a training institute of the army to be an officer. If the people who make it out of a batch of something like 50, hardly 4 or 5 get selected, because it's a very strict. It is by selection. It is not by rejection. So there is no social justice issue involved in that. That I want to select one guy from the scheduled caste. It is essentially merit based. It is unfortunate that the scheduled caste or scheduled tribe and the OBCs and all that, they don't have the education necessary to come up to that level. That is a problem for the government. It is not the army's problem. We look for leadership, and if somebody possesses the components of leadership, then we take him in. If he doesn't, we don't take him in. What happens is that in the more recent past of maybe 30 years, the services selection board comes out with the candidates who have been selected, and then they go for medical. Before they go for medical, what happens is that the corporate world comes and picks up these boys and says, hey, look, this is all that you will get in the army. I'm offering you 3 times that amount. Come and join my company. And many people go. Now, why? It's because the selection process is so meticulous that the corporations, the big corporations, are making use of the army's selection process to get the input for their corporate operations. And it's based on merit.
No, you mentioned leadership. I just wonder, there's this permanent question every time the question of leadership comes up. People wonder if it is inborn or if leaders are made, right? And it also becomes more relevant in a country like India, where some people believe that they are born to lead, right? And I had the good fortune of doing my 11th, 12th in a different.
Sudipto, some people think that they have been sent by God. So nobody is born to lead. The thing is that some people have what we are told in the service selection board is that don't be upset in case you are not selected. In the beginning we are told, don't be upset if you are not selected. You will do well in some other field in life. But at the moment you are not, you may not be selected. And only, as I said, something like 5% get selected. It's a very strict process, and they assess whether you're capable of being trained for leadership. And that training of leadership comes in the military academy. Nobody is born with leadership qualities, but not everybody is born with the same potential for leadership. That is the point.
No, I just was wondering if you would like to debunk then some of the things I picked up, because I studied in a Kendriya Vidyalaya in my 11th and 12th. It was an army establishment, an AAC unit ran that KV, and there were a lot.
Where was that?
Bangalore, KV AAC. So yeah, so a lot of my classmates, of course, their folks were in the defense, and this conversation has to often pick up is the same this martial race logic. कि हम लोग तो मतलब अफसर बनने के लिए राजपूत हैं तो obviously अफसर बनेंगे kind of thing. As a parting statement, do you want to say something to that sentiment?
That may be their wish, and they think that coming from Rajput family that they are leaders.
Or Kodava for that matter.
So.
Or Kodava.
Whichever. Because you will find that in maybe the last 30-40 years, the officers who are joining the army, the young men who are joining the army, are coming more and more from southern states also. You find a large number of Kerala boys joining the army. It's because their education is better for a start, and so they are able to come up to the selection board. You have to come before a selection board. If you are unable to come before a selection board, how can you be selected?
So hypothetically, you said it's the government's problem and that it's a failure of the government that not enough young people from diverse enough backgrounds are eligible for higher service, such as in the army. So if the government started specific programs targeting excluded communities to encourage greater enrollment from their side, do you think that would be a good thing to do, or do you think that will create further tension in society?
I don't think it's a good idea to militarize society. So there's no question of training people up, bring up the general level of education, and automatically you will get people who will have moral courage for a start. And that is the job of society. And who is going to do that? Social reforms have to be there. The government is too busy doing things which are not necessarily for society. It is a social problem which is there in the whole of the country. And it's not that, you have to have a special school for children to be trained up for becoming army officers. What about becoming IAS officers? Why do you have tutorial schools like that? And for the IAS and the general exam, or for IIT, we've got these schools. But government should raise the level of education all over the country, and not create islands of excellence. There should be a general rise in the level of education, and that can come only from the government. The army cannot do it. The army should not do it.
Right, and in the meantime, while the government is doing neither, you have some independent groups which are trying to get people into the army, right? I started my career as a district reporter in coastal Karnataka, and you have many of these Sangh units, RSS affiliated units, which are training young boys, desh ki seva mein jaake army officer mein, army mein bharti hona hai kind of thing. Have you picked up any of that? Is it a source for worry? Do you think it is something that can destabilize the army? Because we see, at least in the police and the bureaucracy, we see a lot of people who have actually been infiltrated, who've infiltrated those services, who have already been trained before they join the services in a certain ideology and then pushed into these services.
Finally, the army is, the inputs to the army are from society. If society is determined to ruin the country, then there's nothing much we can do. If we get people who are indoctrinated before they come to the army, there's nothing we can do, because you can't find out in the services selection board by questioning. You can't find out, because if I come from a particular background and my father is a urban Naxal or Maoist or something, am I going to admit it? I will never admit it, and you will never find out. So that kind of infiltration can happen at any time. But organized infiltration is something which is dangerous for national security in every sector, not just the army.
Okay, thank you so much, General Vombatkere.
And since you have started this 1 hour interview on the basis of what is your ism, I should tell you what my ism is. My ism is, if you like, constitutionalism. It is humanism. It is a peopleism. And yes, it is also Hinduism, because I happen to be born in a Hindu family. And when I say that I am a Hindu and I am proud to be a Hindu, I am not the kind of Hindu which the saffron people are talking about. So those are my isms.
Thank you. That helps a lot, and I'm sure that will be the starting for the next conversation we are going to have after the election. I hope to come back to you once again. Thank you for this time that you gave us. Okay, and let's see what happens after June 4th. Right? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sudipto.